Welcome back to Storytime. The music stopped and Captain Garrett and Raven stood holding hands. Everything around them fell silent. They shared a moment unlike any other, where everything fell away, and it was only them in the room. Then a scurry of feet and voices could be heard suddenly as they were pulled back into reality. They both took a deep breath while unlocking their eyes from one another. Mr. Birch was next. That was the name on Raven's dance card. He stood behind the captain and tapped him on his shoulder, ultimately breaking the spell. Captain Garrett reluctantly let go of Raven's hands and bowed and excused himself. Mr. Birch quickly stepped in his place. His clammy hands brought Raven back to reality. Mr. Birch brought with him small talk that was not welcomed. Each word he spoke smelled of garlic and onion. Raven tried to stay composed as her stomach clenched. When the dance ended, it was a welcome relief. She quickly curtsied, thanked him, and took her leave. Raven found herself outside in the gardens. A full moon was out, and the slight breeze was a welcome change from the stuffy rooms inside. A few couples had ventured out to get fresh air as well. Raven walked slowly through the pebbled path. Her ballet-style slippers were not forgiving. The thin soles allowed her to feel every sharp edge. A rock had found its way into her slipper, and it proved to be quite painful. She took the next bench and slipped off her shoe to get the offending pebble out. Before she could lift her head up, after slipping her shoe back on, she found herself facing Mr. Wood. "Good evening, Mrs. Ratcliffe." "Please call me Raven, Mr. Wood. It was a pleasure meeting you earlier." He quickly smiled, and before she knew it, he was beside her on the bench. She was not comfortable with his closeness. She quickly edged to the end of the bench to create some much-needed distance. "Mr. Wood, I am surprised to see you out here. You have a grand following of young ladies that would love to be courted by you, but you seem to have escaped their attentions." Mr. Wood spoke. "I saw you leave, Raven, and followed you out here. I wanted to get some time alone with you. I was not privileged to be on your dance card this evening. I will not make that same mistake again. Each time I came to call on you, there was another gentleman at the wait." Raven simply sighed. She had met gentlemen as Mr. Wood before, and knew that their true interest was not in courting, rather short affairs that left young ladies soiled and heartbroken. Raven had to admit that Mr. Wood was a very handsome man with dark hair and dark eyes. He had dimples when he smiled. His body spoke of hard labor, unlike the other soft bodies in the rooms. "Mr. Wood, although I am flattered with your interest to get to know me, the feeling, it is not mutual. I am uncomfortable with your company and I beg your leave." By this time, Mr. Wood was fallen in love with this exotic beauty that had no interest in him. He wasn't sure what to do next. The confused look on his face said it all. Raven stood up, curtsied, and walked away slowly, minding not to get another painful pebble. in her shoe. Ray approached her as she scaled the steps to get to the landing outside. As Ray spoke, Raven, stay away from that rake, Mr. Wood. He is no good and will only cause trouble. Yes, I know. I found that out rather quickly, Ray. Come back inside. You should not be out here by yourself. Ray took her hand and walked Raven back in. Mr. and Mrs. Ratcliffe were close by and joined them. Mr. Wood was standing outside in the darkness when suddenly Captain Garrett walked up rather quickly with some aggression. Mr. Wood, I am Captain Garrett, a close friend of the family. I simply want to warn you to stay away from Raven. She is not one of your conquests. She is a true young lady with morals. I will not allow you to sully her name. Surprisingly, Mr. Wood quickly stood up to Captain Garrett. I do hold a true interest in Miss Raven, and I tend to follow through in courting with her parents' permission. Captain Garrett cannot help but to laugh. You want to court Raven? That will never happen. They know your past and present and will not allow that. Regardless, she will have a husband chosen by the king himself. You will never be in the running, nor will I. This is our cold reality. Captain Garrett turned on his heel and walked back into the house as Mr. Wood stood outside slack-jawed. Then suddenly his anger rising unlike ever before, stood up and began panting, walking back and forth like a caged tiger. How in the world did this woman find her way into his heart? He sat back down on the bench, shaking, looking at Raven as she stood inside, next to her parents. I love this woman. I love her. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Kristen Bancroft, a current lover of his many, sat next to him. Darling, I've been waiting to get a moment alone with you. It's been a week and I simply can't be without you. Where have you been? I wrote to you and I waited in the woods at our favorite spot, but you never came. I had a blanket picnic lunch with our favorites. I also bought a new book of poetry for us to read together. Mr. Wood replied, I was out of town and just came back this evening. I had not a chance to read notes, letters, or papers. Kristen edged closer to him and looked around to crane her neck, ready for a kiss. Mr. Wood was too busy staring at Raven inside through the window. Hey, are you even listening to me? Kristen asked. He had no desire to be with Kristen. Mr. Wood stood up, bowed, and asked Kristen to walk her back inside. Many eyes are upon us. He pulled his arm out, and she grudgingly took it as they walked back inside. Kristen followed his eyes and saw who had his attention. Raven Ratcliffe. Her heart sank a bit, knowing he was moving on and there was nothing she could do about it. When they reached the house, Mr. Wood bid Kristen goodbye, and they went their separate ways. Raven had taken refuge in the library, and Mr. Wood had taken note of it, looking at her through the window. He opened the door, and they both accidentally fell into each other. Raven's soft body fell against his chest, and it smelled of lavender and lilac. Raven felt a magnetic pull as she tried to pull away, only to fall back into his arms. This is the end of part 2. I hope you enjoyed the continuation of my short story. Let me know down below if you'd like to hear a part 3, and I will gladly write something up. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know I kind of fumbled a little bit here and there, but I'm just getting my feet wet doing this. So thank you again. Bye.